Welcome to Life Stories. What if the person you trusted the most, the one you thought you knew better than anyone, betrayed you in the worst way possible? Imagine spending years loving someone, only to find out they were testing you all along, watching you like a pawn in their own twisted game. That's exactly what happened to Lily when her entire world turned upside down in a moment that no one could have predicted. In a room full of people who thought they knew the truth, Lily stood there, silent, invisible, and yet somehow stronger than anyone could have imagined. But the real question is, can she forgive the man who shattered her heart, or is it already too late? Let's dive deeper into the secrets, the lies, and the truth that only a few will ever get to know. Stay with us. Lily Thompson stood at the back of the grand hall, her eyes fixed on the ornate chandelier above. The crystals caught the light, casting shimmering patterns across the polished oak floors. But to her, the dazzling display only felt like a cruel reminder of how out of place she was. The mansion, Charles Madison's mansion, was a fortress, a monument to old wealth and legacy, and she was nothing more than a shadow in its walls. Dressed in a simple gray dress, a cardigan that had seen better days, and flats that barely made a sound on the cold marble floor, she knew she wasn't what these people expected. The heirs, the investors, the advisors, they all stood around sipping champagne, their eyes flicking toward her with barely disguised contempt. They saw her as an intruder, someone who didn't belong, someone who was about to be made the subject of their amusement. Lily's hands tightened on the small cloth bag she held, the only possession she'd carried through life's many storms. It wasn't designer, wasn't luxurious, but it was hers, stitched by hand, with a story only she knew. Her heart ached in that moment, not from the looks of disdain, but from the weight of the secret she carried. A secret that no one here knew, no one could possibly guess. "Is that the maid?" Preston Madison, Charles's cousin, sneered, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. He was standing by a mahogany table, wearing a gold tie that glinted in the light, his laughter dripping with mockery. A ripple of snickers followed his words, the crowd eager to join in. Lily didn't flinch. She never flinched. Her dark eyes, so often seen as calm, were steely now. She was the last person to break under pressure. But the humiliation, she felt it, burning at the edges of her composure. She'd known they would mock her. She'd known they would try to make her feel small. What they didn't know was that this moment wasn't for them. The truth of the matter was that Lily Thompson wasn't just a nobody, a shadow or an outsider. She was the wife of the man they were all here to claim from, Charles Madison, a billionaire whose fortune was worth more than most could even dream of. But none of that mattered now. Lily remained silent, her gaze fixed firmly ahead. She didn't need to defend herself. She didn't need to explain who she was or why she was here. The will reading was about to begin, and when it did, the world would know exactly who she was, whether they believed it or not. The room grew quieter as the lawyer, Derek Anderson, entered, carrying a briefcase that seemed too heavy for a man his age. At 60, he was a seasoned professional, someone who had seen it all. He set the briefcase down on the table with deliberate care, and every eye in the room followed his movements. Charles had always been calculated, always 3 steps ahead. The will, as it turned out, was part of a much larger plan, a test, one that Lily had helped design. Derek opened the briefcase and pulled out a single, sealed envelope. The tension in the room was palpable. The guests stood at the edge of their seats, their eyes locked on the lawyer. It was like a moment frozen in time, a moment where everything they'd fought for, their status, their wealth, their power, hung in the balance. Lily could feel their eyes on her. She could hear the whispers, the judgment, the ridicule. And yet she stood tall, her breathing steady, her heart resolute. She knew that nothing could shake her now, not even their cruelty. Derek cleared his throat and began reading the will. His voice was steady, deliberate, but as he read the words, a twist of fate took hold of the room. "I, Charles Madison, being of sound mind, declare this my final will." Derek's voice paused, the silence in the room thick with anticipation. Lily's breath hitched. She knew what was coming. To my family, colleagues, and associates, I leave nothing but this truth. Wealth reveals character, not worth. A collective gasp echoed through the room. The faces around her, once filled with smug confidence, now betrayed confusion, disbelief. This wasn't what they expected. But Derek wasn't done. All my assets, my company shares, properties, accounts, and intellectual rights, are bequeathed to one person. The one who stood by me for no reason other than love. The one who never asked for my net worth, never sought my name for status. My wife, Lily Thompson. The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, confusion. Preston's smile faltered, Clara's phone slipped from her hand, and Gerald Hayes looked as if he might choke on his disbelief. Lily didn't move. Her silence in that moment became her power. Her presence, once mocked, now commanded the room. "She's a fraud," Gerald Hayes shouted, his face red with rage. Logan would never let someone like her near his estate. He was quickly joined by others, voices rising in outrage, their words sharp as knives. But Lily stood firm, her gaze unflinching, even as their accusations grew louder. Derek cleared his throat again, silencing the room. "The will is legal, signed and notarized. Supporting documents are available for verification." He pulled out a folder, and in that folder was the proof that would shatter their world. A photograph of a younger Charles Madison, laughing with his arm around Lily, at a courthouse on the day they had married. The date on the back of the photo confirmed it, 7 years ago. The room was silent. The weight of truth crashed over the crowd, and the people who had ridiculed her now found themselves lost in their own confusion. They had all been so sure, so certain that she was nothing. But in that moment, Lily proved them wrong. The twist didn't stop there. Lily stood and stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the floor. The crowd watched her in stunned silence, not knowing what to expect next. And then, with a small but deliberate motion, she reached into her bag. The sound of a remote clicking filled the room, and the large screen at the front of the hall flickered to life. The camera showed a dimly lit room. In it sat Charles Madison, looking as alive as ever, his blue eyes sharp, his presence unmistakable. "You thought I was gone." Charles's voice echoed through the room, calm and unyielding. "You thought this was your chance to carve up my life. But I've been watching, listening. Every word, every sneer, every lie. Lily warned me you'd show your true colors." The crowd froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Charles's voice continued, filled with quiet authority. "I was never dead. It was all a test of loyalty, and not one of you passed. What would you have done if you were Lily, standing in the face of such mockery and cruelty? Do you think Charles's plan for justice was fair, or was it too much for his family to bear?" The room was still as the camera feed clicked off, leaving only one question in the air. How far would Lily go to get the truth? And how much would the family lose in the process? Lily stood motionless, her eyes still locked on the screen, but everything inside her was unraveling. Charles's voice continued to echo in the cavernous hall, and each word cut through her with a quiet intensity. "I've been watching, listening. Every word, every sneer, every lie. Lily warned me you'd show your true colors." The camera feed flickered off, and the room was plunged into darkness for a split second, as though the light of truth had temporarily blinded everyone. The murmurs started, slow, confused, then frantic. A few guests stumbled backward, their jaws slack, unable to comprehend the scene they had just witnessed. But none of that mattered now. Not anymore. Charles wasn't dead. He had orchestrated this entire charade to test the family, and they had failed miserably. Lily felt the weight of it, the weight of being right, of knowing all along what they were capable of, and yet she hadn't anticipated how deeply the truth would hurt. The truth was a heavy thing, and now, standing here before them, she couldn't escape the full weight of it. She turned her gaze back to the room, to the stunned faces around her. The people who had once mocked her now stood frozen, unable to look away, but their eyes no longer held the same contempt. Now they were full of something different: fear, uncertainty, guilt. They had all assumed she was nothing. They had all assumed she didn't belong. But now the truth had turned the tables. Preston was the first to break the silence. He stepped forward, his hands trembling as he pulled at his gold tie, the thing that had marked him as superior, a man of power. He looked as though he wanted to scream, but instead, he muttered something unintelligible under his breath. His bravado, once so thick, now felt like a mask that was slipping away, revealing the small man beneath it. "You can't do this," he choked out, his voice betraying him. "You can't just—" "You'll find that I can." Charles's voice cut through the air with the authority of someone who had been quietly watching for too long. "You thought you could tear my life apart. You thought you could break my wife, reduce her to nothing. But now, you'll learn that there are consequences to every action." Lily's stomach twisted as she looked at Charles, the man who had once been her husband in name alone. He was here, alive, standing in front of her, but so much had changed. She didn't know how to feel. Was she relieved? Furious? Confused? She couldn't tell. The emotions that churned inside her were raw and painful, and for a moment she felt like she might drown in them. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Charles didn't answer immediately. His gaze softened, and for a brief moment it felt as though the walls between them had dissolved. "I had to know, Lily," he said quietly. "I had to know who you were when you didn't have to be anything else. When it wasn't about the money, the power, or the name. I needed to know if you could love me for me." The words hit her like a thunderclap. The truth of his plan, the truth of his actions, all of it had been about one thing: testing her. And she had passed. But at what cost? As the room filled with gasps and mutterings, Lily's heart began to race. She looked at the people around her, those who had taunted her, humiliated her, and for the first time, she realized that she had no desire to reclaim the life they had offered her. She didn't want their wealth. She didn't want their approval. All she wanted was the man who had disappeared from her life without a trace, leaving her to rebuild it all from nothing. But now, with the truth laid bare, she was faced with another choice. "Charles, Lily started, her voice catching in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to reconcile the woman she had become with the woman who had loved him without question. She saw it in his eyes, a flicker of understanding, a glimmer of the man she had once known. But there was a coldness now, too, a distance that she hadn't expected. Was this how he had always been, hidden beneath the wealth and the secrets? "I did it for us, Lily," Charles said softly, but the words felt hollow. "I had to make sure. I had to make sure you were the one who would stand by me, no matter what." Her heart felt like it was breaking. This wasn't the man she had married. This wasn't the man she had loved. He had used her, no, they had used each other, and now, standing in front of him, she realized that what they had once shared was buried beneath a mountain of lies and manipulation. The silence that followed was heavy. It pressed down on her chest, suffocating. The weight of the choices she had to make, the truth she had been forced to confront, felt unbearable. Her eyes drifted to the guests, still standing in stunned silence. They had wanted the empire. They had wanted the riches, the power, the fame. But now, they had nothing. Their faces were pale, their pride stripped away like a veil. And yet, as Lily stood there, facing the man who had betrayed her trust, she realized something deeper. There was a power in letting go, a strength in walking away from the things that held no meaning anymore. As Charles turned to face the crowd, his eyes filled with that same ruthless determination that had once captivated her, she made a choice. "I didn't come here for this," she said, her voice steady now. "I came to see who you were, who you really are. And I don't need any of this." With that, she turned and walked away, her footsteps quiet but resolute. But as she reached the door, a voice called after her, breaking the fragile silence. "Lily." Charles's voice was filled with something between desperation and regret. But it was too late. She didn't turn back. She couldn't. Not now. What would you do if the person you loved most tested you in a way you never expected? Would you be able to forgive them, or would it change everything between you forever? Lily had made her decision. But what would Charles do next? And more importantly, what would the world look like for her now, with all the lies and all the truths laid bare? The answers were still out there, waiting to be discovered. Lily's footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as she made her way out of the grand hall. The sound was strangely comforting, like a rhythm marking her newfound freedom. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from fatigue, but from the weight of the decision she had just made. The last few hours had torn her apart in ways she couldn't begin to explain. Yet, there was something undeniable in her heart. She had made the right choice. Outside, the night air was crisp, and the stars above seemed to shine brighter than ever before, almost as if they were offering her some kind of silent reassurance. She paused, taking a deep breath, her gaze lingering on the sprawling estate behind her. The mansion, once a symbol of her dreams, her pain, her love, was now nothing more than a fortress of broken promises. She had spent years feeling like an outsider, even as she had stood by Charles's side. They had built a life together, a life that, to the world, had seemed perfect. But beneath the surface, there had always been something unsettling, something that had gnawed at her soul. The knowledge that she had never truly been loved for who she was, but for what she represented. She had loved him with everything she had, but now, standing on the edge of the estate, she realized that love alone could never fill the emptiness of a life built on lies. It was a bitter truth, but it was hers to bear. A car pulled up next to her, the headlights briefly blinding her before they dimmed. Lily turned, surprised to see Charles stepping out of the driver's side. His face was drawn, tired, the lines of stress deeper than she remembered. He opened the passenger door, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of desperation and sorrow. "Lily, please," his voice cracked, and for the first time she heard the rawness in it that had always been hidden behind his composed facade. "Don't leave like this. We can work through this. Please, don't walk away." She felt her heart clench at the sight of him, the man she had once believed would be her forever. But the words that had once seemed so full of love now felt empty, hollow. "Charles," she said softly, shaking her head, "you don't get to do this. You don't get to test me, break me, and then expect me to pick up the pieces. I'm not your experiment." His face faltered for a moment, the mask of confidence cracking. He stepped toward her, but she took a step back, the space between them growing wider than it ever had been. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to know if you could love me for me, not the money, not the empire, but I see now, I see that I was wrong. I was selfish." Lily closed her eyes, the sting of his words cutting deeper than she cared to admit. She had spent so many years wondering if he would ever truly see her, and now, when the truth had come to light, all that remained was a hollow shell of the life they had shared. She had loved him, but the love she had given was never enough to erase the lies he had built around them. "I loved you, Charles. I really did," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of her emotions. "But I can't keep living in your shadow, hoping one day you'll realize that I'm more than just a test. I'm more than this life." Tears welled in her eyes, but she wiped them away, refusing to let him see the weakness he had always accused her of. She had been strong for so long, but now she was letting go. He stood there, motionless, his face twisted with regret. "What do you want from me, Lily?" he asked quietly. "What can I do to make this right?" For a moment, Lily's gaze softened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that somewhere beneath the facade, the man she had loved still existed. But as much as she yearned for that reconciliation, she knew deep down that it would never be enough. He had already chosen his path, and so had she. "I don't want anything from you, Charles," she said, her voice steady, though her heart shattered with every word. "I just want to be free." She turned, walking away from the man who had once been her world, the man who had shown her both the heights of love and the depths of betrayal. But as she took her first step toward the car, she heard his voice one last time, low and full of pain. "I'll always love you, Lily," he called, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't. The car door slammed shut behind her, and the engine roared to life. Lily pressed her palm to the window, her breath fogging up the glass as she looked back one last time at the place she had once called home. The mansion loomed in the distance, a reminder of everything she had lost. But she knew something now, something she had never understood before. It wasn't the house, the money, or even the man that defined her. It was the strength to walk away, to choose herself in the face of everything she had been told to want. She wasn't just the woman who had been wronged. She was the woman who had finally found her own worth. As the car drove away, she closed her eyes, letting the cool night air wash over her. For the first time in years, she felt alive. And in that moment, Lily knew that no matter where life took her, she would be okay. How do you think Lily will rebuild her life after all the betrayal and hurt she's faced? What would you have done if you were in her shoes, facing the truth about someone you loved? Stay tuned for more twists and turns in Lily's journey. What comes next for her will redefine everything she once believed about love, trust, and finding true freedom. If you enjoyed this story, type 100 in the comments. Where are you watching from? Share your thoughts and feelings about the story, and don't forget to share the video with your friends. Thanks for watching on the Life Stories channel.